This episode and every episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show is brought to you by Ironmonger Brewing. Visit Ironmonger at their taproom in Marietta, Georgia, or online at ironmongerbrewing.com.
Open up a tab, grab a seat, and pour a pint. It's time for the Beer Guys Radio Show.
You want free beer? Go to the brewery.
Dedicated to the art, science, and enjoyment of craft beer.
Yo, what's wrong with the beer we got?
Now, here are your hosts, Tim Dennis and Brian Hewitt.
Welcome to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We're broadcasting from the Beer Guys Radio Studios in Marietta, Georgia. This is episode 212, and we're talking homebrewing classic styles and designing your homebrew recipes. I'm Tim Dennis, and with me, as always, is my good friend and co-host, Brian Hewitt.
Hey, Tim. And so, homebrew. We should talk with homebrewers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Joining us, we have Michael Syrop and Ron Mitchell, the homebrewers who are known together as Rainy Day Brewery. Guys, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Absolutely. And Brian, something you forgot to mention about these fine gentlemen, about a recent award that they won.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that.
They got the top spot in our 2019 Best of Georgia Beers, the best homebrewers in the state of Georgia.
How could I have forgotten
Among
this?
Many other brewing awards, right, guys?
We want to hang that on the wall at the brewery.
We're going to have to get that, man. We need to get some plaques done there.
We really do, yeah.
Times. Well, guys, thanks for joining us. We always love talking homebrew. We haven't had a chance to homebrew in quite a while. We still like talking it, following the news and the science of what's going on. We just cracked into one of your beers here, a Kentucky Common, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So what is a Kentucky
style.
Common?
It's a pre-prohibition brown ale, basically. It was a very heavy 6-row malt and corn. Everything else
really?
pretty simple, yeah.
Interesting. It's tasty. I like it.
So is this how similar, or is this in any way similar to the California Common? Is there lager yeast used in it at warm temperatures, or is it just
this
a
we
name?
used a regular California ale strain, not a common,
Okay, all right.
Do any other states have a common style other than California and Kentucky?
I'm not aware of
That's
any.
me either. Okay.
And this was one, actually, they call it the Kentucky Common, but it was primarily just around the city of Louisville. It was really,
Louisville Common
really
there,
focused.
Cool.
I think
it's always fun to learn that kind of stuff.
I think alliteration is the key. California Common, Kentucky Common, like Alpharetta Common doesn't sound quite as good. You don't have that alliteration.
Georgia Common.
Common.
What would be a Georgia Common, Brian?
Boy, I don't know.
Would it need peaches?
Probably, yeah. Some sort of light peach ale, maybe light tart peach
Just
ale.
mash up a bunch of peaches, throw some yeast in there.
Exactly.
That's it, man. That's all you need. Well, Brian, how was your week, man?
It was good. It was eventful. So, as you know, the big game happened.
big game.
So we did a little celebration, little hanging out, doing that. It was a good time, drinking some beers from KC and some beers from San Francisco.
We played along,
So,
man. We
yeah,
got
exactly.
some for the cities there. Right?
Tag 7, El Sully. But one of the more interesting things I did was I went to a Super Bowl, SOUPER Bowl, and I ate a lot of basically liquid food.
Soup.
So, yes.
Soup, as they call it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. So it was I'm not a big soup guy, but I enjoy that event. So ordinarily I don't order soup anywhere I go. I eat my year's supply of soup at Orpheus's Super Bowl when it comes on. So
That's I've tried many times to get you to go rock some soup with me, ramen, or now occasionally I can get you to do ramen,
pho, ramen.
but pho
yeah.
you'll usually pass on pho. Which
I'm rarely in the mood for that. Like
you're
once in a blue
usually
moon.
in the mood for it when I'm not asking you to go. I don't know why exactly you feel the need to do that.
Yeah.
But,
I like to tell you
always
about it
go
when
get
I'm
it.
not.
Yeah.
Some nights after I've been drinking good, I do like to break open some of my Shin ramen.
The spicy.
Yeah, the one that the multi-satchel ramen. It's the good ramen because there's satchels. There's like 3 of them that come with it, not just the one flavor packet. There's 3 flavor
powders
packets.
and oils and all
Yes.
this. But the Super Bowl, the Soup Super Bowl that you went
Yes.
to, Brian, charity event. So
Yes.
they to raise funds for the Atlanta Community Food Bank. I believe this is their second or third year doing it. Do you recall, Brian?
I think it's the second time they've done it, but over 3 years, I think, because I think we went to the first one, and that was actually, they skipped a year 2 years ago.
Yeah, I know that
that's
they
right.
mentioned they've raised in previous years, they raised over $4,000 for the Atlanta Community Food Bank. Doing the event again this time. People get cool trophies for their soup, and it's for a good cause.
I did all the talking. What did you do this week?
What did I do this week, Brian? So I did, of course, Super Bowl party
Sure.
there, but I also went over to Burnt Hickory Brewery. Hadn't been up there for a while. Got up there, visit them. Digits, the orange, the orange IPA that they did, blood orange IPA.
Classic.
One of Georgia's original blood orange IPAs. And I just kind of sat and hung out and talked with brewmaster Scott Hadeen about music and life and beer and all kinds of fun stuff. So that I took it kind of easy, just hung out at one brewery a little bit, and then Super Bowl party on Sunday. Now I did, Brian, as I'd promised previously, I'm trying some non-alcoholic beers. So Ron, Michael, have you guys tried any non-alcoholic beers?
I can't say that I have. We tried the low alcohol beer here a little bit ago, but no O'Doul's or any of the completely non-alcoholic.
You know, I'm going to back this up. I had a story one time when I was maybe 10, 11 years old. The health food store sold a beer. I think it was called Texas Select. That was a non-alcoholic beer. And me and my buddy, they sold us one can of it. And we were walking down the street of our subdivision, drinking it, passing it back and forth between these two 10-year-old kids. We got busted. Cop pulled us over. And he's like, what are you guys doing? And I got so nervous, man. I'm tearing up there. I'm like, oh, my God, I'm busted by the cops. The pigs got me. Yeah. And I showed him, and anyhow, he looked it over, and he let us go. But I was nervous there. The cops had busted me with beer at 10 years old. But I tried, because I have to watch my alcohol for a little while, I tried Wellbeing Brewing's Victory Wheat, which is an electrolyte and vitamin-infused beer. And I tell you what, man, I like the taste of it. It's refreshing, it's light, it's crisp, it's very citrusy, but I still don't know if it would fit the beer bill for me.
I think Shandy was the
Zach had mentioned it had a big shandy
yeah.
aroma to it, and once he said that, I'm right. I agreed with him. It had kind of a shandy characteristic to it, so not bad. And you know, if you end up in a situation where you can't drink alcohol for whatever reason, at least there are some options out there. And like I said, I enjoyed that. I'm just not sure if it said beer to me that much.
Sure. You know, I think it's time for the beers of the week.
Crack open a cold one. It's the Truck and Tap Beer of the Week. Woo-hoo! Craft beer and food trucks in downtown Woodstock. Truckandtap.com.
Well, Brian, as always, we have lots of good beers to get into. We did a little pre-gaming with Bell's Lighthearted. We also have from our friends here at Rainy Day Brewery. You guys brought a lot of beers to share with us, right?
Well, we wanted you guys to have a selection.
Best.
Yeah, you know.
So we have a Berliner, we have a Berry Berliner, a Rye IPA, a Blonde Ale, a Coffee Blonde. We have this Kentucky Common, and there is a Coffee Nitro Stout.
Yes.
Right, and I think some others, but those are the ones that I remember. So we've got plenty of drinking to do.
Plenty.
Brian. So, Brian, what's happening this week in the news?
What's in the news? The beer guys have the scoop.
Extra, extra, read all about it.
Time for headlines.
All right, so we've got some big news from some old familiar beer names. To start, Carol Stout is retiring and closing Stout's Brewing Company. So the brewery was founded back in 1987 in Adamstown, Pennsylvania, and Stout's is a pioneer in the modern craft beer movement, being around that early and setting their beer around when other people weren't making it back then. It had pretty wide distribution, and I know we drank it here in Georgia. I don't believe it's still distributed here, but we were drinking it here as Fat Dog and Smooth Operator. I checked into those here. But speaking of pioneers, Carol Stout, it was the first female brewmaster in the U.S. after the repeal of Prohibition. So it's kind of a big milestone.
Stuff, man.
Yeah,
this is some major news here.
Exactly. So explaining why she plans to close the brewery, Carol Stout says, we're just not moving enough volume to justify the expense of keeping the brewery open. However, they're not opposed. They're not closing the doors to any business opportunities that could keep the Stouts brand alive in the future. So still a chance the brewery could go on under new ownership. According to Brewbound, the brewery is down from 10,000 barrels at some point to just 2,000 barrels a year in 2018. So they've lost some.
That's a big hit
stuff
there. Yeah.
Also, we have Wisconsin's Sprecher Brewing has been sold to an investor group. That investor group is based in Milwaukee. Founder Randy Sprecher explains that the reason he sold the 35-year-old brewery to this investor group is because it will keep the brewery local. The 75-year-old plans to retire, but he will maintain a stake in the brewery as an investor. The new owners, which have backgrounds in electronics, technology, real estate, and even Miller Coors, plan to make Sprecher, quote, the craft beverage icon of America. So,
I don't recall hearing about Sprecher until the hard root beer craze a few years ago. Remember the flash in the pan that was the hard root beer? Not Your Father's came out and all of that. So.
Who did Not Your Father's? Because I think that was Coors or Pabst or somebody.
I don't remember.
It was
covertly. Apparently a brewing company but they were purchased, I guess, fairly early or maybe we just weren't following hard root beer at the time.
But yes, around that time, Sprecher, one of the reasons that the investors were interested in, they have root beers, they've got craft sodas, they've got seltzers. They've been doing this for years, so they've well established into the alternative beverage situation.
Good stuff. Well, you're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We do need to take a break. But we'll be back very soon to talk with Rainy Day Brewery.
As a brewery owner or taproom manager, are you looking for ways to enhance your customer experience while maximizing your revenues? Craft Cellar is a mobile solution that helps your brewery drive sales and attract new customers through online pre-sales for beer releases, events, and memberships. Get details now at craftcellar.com. Mention Beer Guys Radio after sign-up and extend your free trial to a full 30 days. Remember, craftcellar.com, craftcellr.com.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. Remember, all podcasts are available on demand, so if you missed the broadcast, get the podcast. Beer Guys Radio is available on all popular podcasting apps. Now let's get back to some homebrewing talk.
Homebrewing and classic styles, Brian. Two great things.
Yes.
There. Absolutely. Ron, Michael, thanks again for joining us. We appreciate it.
Certainly.
And, we're going to start with, I guess it could be an easy or a difficult question, but what got you guys started in homebrewing?
I'm going to let Ron take that one because he got us started.
He got it going, huh? Okay.
Our kids are both the same age, and we were both very involved in their, sporting activities and all of that. As the younger group was graduating high school, we kind of sat around one day with a beer in our hands and said, what are we going to do now that we're not running out to soccer and football and basketball and gymnastics and softball and doing all of this every weekend? And then probably a day later, I got a Groupon for a Learn to Brew class over at Brew Warehouse. That shut down a couple of years ago.
R.I.P. That was a great place.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So we went and did the class and said, I think we can do this. And bought that little $5 turkey fryer and 5-gallon pot and went out and made a batch of extract wit and turned out pretty good. And we said, we really can do this. And we just kind of went from there. That was, I guess, about 4 years ago.
Let's say you do still have the family in that, but I hear a lot of people say something like, with all the commercial beers we've got out now, I've heard a lot of people say, why should I homebrew? Why should someone, with all these great beers we've got out, why would someone want to homebrew?
For me, first of all, it's fun. Ron and I get to spend a day together. We hang out. There's a social aspect to it. There are great homebrew clubs here in Atlanta. We have several, but anywhere you go in this country, and you guys know this, the craft brew community is really collegial and real friendly, and we have some great brewers, professional brewers in this town who are there to help out the home brewers. It's just a fun hobby.
It's a fun because it's fun, man, and you get beer out of it, right?
Yes,
exactly. Yeah. You get the privilege or the pleasure of having made something, and that something could give you a buzz potentially, and could taste really good. And it's good that people get into homebrewing because that's where the future brewers come from. They have to start somewhere.
The experimentation and stuff starts with these guys. Now, do you guys remember the first time that you got a little intoxicated on your own beer?
Oh, the first time, or which? Yes.
Yes,
which is the worst time or the first time?
Both would probably be great stories, right? Yeah.
Well, the worst time would probably be me running down the driveway with no clothes on. That
sounds. Yeah, I guess depending on your point of view,
that's probably the best time.
Yes, and I heard from my daughters when I put that picture on social media. I had to take that one off pretty quick.
Get that down there. Brian and I, a few years ago, we were invited to brew a collaboration of one of our home brews with Burnt Hickory Brewery in Kennesaw, Georgia, and serve it at their anniversary party. And we were young home brewers at the time. The first time we ever served there, and it was the first time we had kegged a beer. So I'm trying to get the dispensing right. I'm trying to get the
regulator
the regulator set, the pressure right. And I probably drank a solid gallon myself.
Testing it out.
So by the end of this event, we're just ripped. Totally unintentional, because once we got the event going, the people running the event were coming to us and saying, "Can I get you a beer?" So they're getting us Burnt Hickory beers, which they're notorious for, these big, strong beers. We were excited because we were serving our brew to people.
Sure.
And it was just the perfect storm, Brian.
Yeah, all of their like special higher gravity things were coming around, drinking tons of ours. It was a great time. Why should people get into it? I see another thing. I was looking at Homebrew Talk just because, hey, it's been a while since I've looked. We're going to talk about homebrewing. People ask, and it's a thing amongst homebrewers, how many of you drink exclusively your own beer? They call it being self-sufficient. So there's the opposite extreme. Some people brew because that's all they're going to drink.
What they drink.
They make
right?
exactly what they want when they want, and that's all they drink. And there's a surprising number of people who are 75, 80%, even 100%, nothing but what they brew.
I know when we were active, we were in the Woodstock Malt Monkeys homebrew club for a while, and I can remember going to those and talking about the whale commercial beers that are coming out, the ones people are chasing. A lot of those guys had no idea. They homebrewed. They drank their homebrew. So.
And sometimes it was for economic reasons, but sometimes it's just because I like what I make and I like it. I like having it available whenever I want it. So
I like
makes
that
sense.
It's fun. Like you said, you spend time with your buddies, you hang out, you have a good day, you get beer, a little mix of art and science and voodoo to end up with what you get. So it's a pretty cool hobby, pretty good time.
And if I may just throw one other thing in, we do enter a lot of competitions, and if you have a competitive nature, it's fun. It's fun to get recognition for doing a good beer.
Get all those. Then you can wear all your beer medals like you're a general of brewing, of home brewing.
They should convert those, instead of the medals that you hang around your neck, into stuff you could pin on a shirt, like bars.
Yeah.
And so you could become like a 12 medal general or something like that, or lapel stars or
get
something
your
like
homebrew
that.
club shirts, so they're like military shirts,
Yeah,
and then
right.
you get your bars all in there for your beers. So
I like that.
That'd be fun, man.
Yeah.
So we're going to start a new
It looks
trend.
like a convention
Absolutely.
of Banana Republic
exactly.
dictators. So.
Mr. T of beer brewing.
That's it, and be looking good. Well, guys, we were going to spend some of our time today talking about classic styles, and something we've seen lately is there's a mild resurgence, I think, and seeing some of these come back. We've seen for a few years when you're hanging out with a brewer, they're not drinking their big, crazy IPAs and that, Once they go through the day, a lot of times you hang out with brewers after hours, they're sipping a Pilsner, they're going for a mild ESB, something like that. And we're seeing those styles come back. More bars are offering them. We're seeing more canned offerings. We've got a couple breweries here in Atlanta now that, focus on these styles, which a few years ago you would have thought a brewery was crazy for that. So what do you think is the reason with all these? Are we just seeing the pendulum swing back the other way? I think that's the way Owen had said at the Cask Ale tasting.
Yeah.
It's, we went to this crazy extreme. There's a beer coming out soon that has been mentioned in Thrillist and Forbes and all of these, a sour made with Skittles and Tricks from Pontoon Brewing. So is it the pendulum swinging back from that extreme of those kind of beers?
My opinion is it's a combination of things. It's the fact that we chased the most IBUs for a while. Now, then we chased the most double
Biggest
dry hop,
haze.
triple dry hop, quadruple dry hop. The market got saturated, and I love those beers. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't love those beers. They're awesome. The big stouts and such. I think as the consumer becomes more educated, as more people are into craft beer, you realize the skill that goes into the simple beer. As you mentioned, Tim, Pilsners. A Pilsner, it tastes simple, but the fact is, if you mess up a Pilsner, everyone's going to know
It's out there.
There's
right?
no place to hide in a Pilsner is kind of a phrase that they use.
And that's as a home brewer, I think that's the way you can really kind of judge yourself. There's nowhere to hide. Can you make a good, simple tasting beer that just is easy to drink?
I don't think we ever tried our hand at like a Pilsner or anything. We didn't really.
We did like an
We
ESB.
had the gear to lager, but we didn't. We never tried lagering, I don't think. So, or we did a quick lager.
We
once,
did a
didn't
quick
we?
lager, yeah.
So, Brian, you mentioned something earlier. We were talking about these classic styles coming back, and I think the Kolsch. We're seeing the Helles lagers come around.
Lagers.
I think the stout, like a basic stout, where they used to always have all these adjuncts in it. We're seeing more people either requesting or brewers making just a basic stout. But you mentioned there's a couple, Brian, that we're not seeing much resurgence on.
And at least one of them I kind of would. I really kind of miss the amber/red ale. I'm not seeing so much of people getting on board with that train. I consider the amber especially to be kind of a classic style that was around. I was drinking them all the time in the late 90s. There are people brewing Hefeweizens, but it's not a hot thing. People are going wits if they're going anything wheat or maybe blonde, but you don't see Hefs so much anymore. I don't think those are having a resurgence, but I think the big thing is right now is the lagers. Big, huge resurgence of lagers. Like,
see, you kill me when you say that, Brian.
What's that?
Lager is a very broad thing. A lager is not a specific style.
That is true, but
I don't accept your explanation.
I wanted
before
to
you
say
even start
I
here.
was thinking
Yeah.
I wanted to say Pilsner, but I think no, I'm seeing a lot of things that are categorized as lager, and they're different kinds of lagers. Yes, but overall lager varieties, especially on the lighter end. Obviously, there are beers that are lagered. That I'm not talking about the darker, heavier ones, but on the lighter end, the lighter lagers. Yeah, I think that's.
And on the flip side of that, we're seeing a lot of ales too.
I say yes.
So.
But things just described as being a lager, there is a huge.
I see. You do see a lot that just say lager, light lager, something like that.
Southbound Mountain Jam just says lager.
I still disapprove of it, Brian.
I think what I said was technically accurate, and I stand by it.
Okay. Well, we need to take a break. We're going to talk more about classic styles and brewing them and developing your recipes. Right after this, you're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Have you ever thought about owning your own brewery but don't know what it takes to get one built? We're Storytime Construction, and we build breweries. We're Georgia's most experienced and hands-on contractors when it comes to building new breweries and tap rooms, or expanding existing breweries. We offer full build-outs, remodeling, and additions, as well as consulting and construction management. Give us a call at 770-733-4343. Storytime Construction. We build breweries.
Is your brewery or restaurant flooring all jacked up? Your foundation needs to be protected from heat, chemicals, and other contaminants. At the same time, you want to make sure it's slip resistant and you can clean up your messes with soap and water. You know who to call?
ResTech.
We've been manufacturing poured-in-place flooring since 2002, and we've got solutions to fit any facility's needs. Go on and visit our website at
ResTech.net.
That's RES-TEK.net. Drop us a line and we will come to you for a free evaluation.
Oh, yeah. Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
To be the man, you gotta beat the man. Woo!
Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. I want to give a quick shout out to one of our great radio affiliates, KFAR 660 AM and 97.5 FM in Fairbanks, Alaska. Catch Beer Guys Radio on KFAR every Saturday at midnight Alaska Standard Time. Now back to Homebrew Talk.
Homebrew Talk. Brian, Rainy Day Brewery, Marietta, Georgia. Good times. We have just consumed your blonde ale, and we are currently drinking your coffee blonde, right? Can you tell us a little bit about these beers?
The blonde, this is our first blonde that we brewed, and it goes back to the idea that it's a simple beer, so you've really got to be on your game to get it where you want it. You know, the coffee version is something we like. We like the idea of adding coffee to a lighter beer. We love coffee and dark beers, but it brings something out, and frankly, Ron and I have kids that are both in their early 20s. We have daughters who are in their early 20s, and they love coffee beers. So
coffee beers?
Yeah.
Yes. Since Brian doesn't like to talk about coffee beers much, I'll ask a couple of questions here. How do you guys do your coffee?
It's cold brewed. So after brewing, just like you would, it's basically dry hop. We're taking the beans. I'm crushing them. I'm not grinding. I'm just kind of giving a real coarse crush, putting them in a muslin bag, soaking them for 24 hours. Pulling them out of the keg.
So you're cold brewing in your beer?
Yes.
Not cold brewing coffee and then pouring it in. You put beans in the beer and let it cold brew.
It's already a relatively light beer. You know, it's low upper fours, low fives ABV. I didn't really want to add more water to it, so I figured why not just put the beans right inside the beer. And it's good. Beer's cold, just like water's cold. Just let it go.
Sounds good. Brian, do you have any other coffee-related questions?
Well, I was going to ask you, I know that you said that it was a Balinese coffee in here. Is that kind of your coffee of choice? You go with Bali, or do you have other types of coffee you've played with?
If I may, there's a local independent coffee place here up on the Marietta Square called Cool Beans Coffee. And I went in there and kind of talked to the people there, and they're really good about the notes that come out of different coffees and stuff. Yeah. So I consulted with them. I don't pretend to be an expert on coffee, and Now, if I might make a recommendation, I had the coffee shop right next to Sweetwater. They have La Finca, a blend from the Honduras. It's got some nice blueberry notes,
And so I would say a coffee like that in the right beer would be marvelous. But I like that blueberry note.
It's fun to look at the different coffees, like Terrapin did the pack where they had 4 different coffees in the same stout.
East Pole.
I think to pick up that berry
Yeah.
flavor, it's going to have to be in a cream or a blonde or so. I think in a stout, that berry's going to get lost.
You might lose it, yeah.
Well, it doesn't get buried in a coffee, so it may still shine through there, depending on the depth of your stout there, right?
And the depth of your taste buds.
True. Good stuff. I'm a super taster here. So, well, guys, we've been talking about classic styles, kind of the resurgence, the popularity there. We want to talk a little bit about any idiosyncrasies with brewing these styles, and then maybe talk a little bit about recipe development. So, Ron, I think you'd kind of mentioned that that these classic styles are really a test for a homebrewer's skill because you can't bury anything behind your adjuncts or behind your coffee or whatever,
the first time I think it was we tried a pills, and I thought did everything right. I've got temperature control, so started cold and then did a diacetyl rest and did all of that, pulled it out, tasted it, and it just bite in a stick of butter. I don't know why it was there, but it was there. So that batch didn't work. So if that was in an ale or in a darker beer, maybe it wouldn't have been noticeable. You dry hop the heck out of it. You could probably bury it, but not in that beer. That one, it was there.
It was there. No doubt that was happening.
I tried
right?
re-fermenting. I added more fresh yeast to it, I can't think of the exact term for that. It didn't kill it. Ended up, I don't know that we dumped that beer, but it gave it to people that really didn't know what they were drinking.
Fair enough.
I think I've heard that I don't know if this is true or not. I believe I read that if you put Brett in a beer with a diacetyl problem, it can clean that up. I'm guessing you probably didn't try that.
No, that'd be interesting.
You have to keep that in mind because now unless you are really good about cleaning your equipment, you have introduced that into all of your beers. So
I think it's one they say if you're not ready to go, bready or wild like that, I think it may be 3711. Is that the French Saison yeast, I think?
That is one of them.
That's
yes.
one that'll just chomp. Like, if it can be fermented, that one's gonna do it, right? So you may change the character a little bit with that funky Saison yeast, but if you've got a stuck fermentation, that's the beast you want to send in if you don't want to go Brett.
This was completely fermented. It just, the diacetyl was just in there.
It just wasn't going anywhere.
Maybe that's a case where you put a Harry Potter label on it and call it
butterbeer
or whatever.
Yeah, butterbeer, man. Yeah.
Now it's okay.
It's all about the marketing, right? How you market it.
That's it, man. You got to do it. Mark the label sour. If something goes funky on you, boom, it's a sour beer.
Well, but the other thing is that we went back and we've done it again since. We're still working on developing our lagers, our pilsners, because they are so difficult. But the nice thing is, I was talking earlier, the professional brewers. There's a couple of local guys that I can call them up and say, this is what I'm doing, or this is what's going on with my recipe. They'll help you out. They're just so great. The local guys here, specifically here, Jason Pellet at Orpheus
Brewing, right?
And Gavin McKenna at Atlanta Brewing. I can send them an email any time of day or night. Within 24 hours, I get a response. They're just wonderful guys.
Yeah, I've got tons of help out of Jason's helped me a lot. And that's one thing when we started brewing, I'm the type, if I don't know something, I can't Google it. I'm going to find somebody that knows it. I'm going to get the answer. So I'd go out bugging these guys. Scott Hadeen, and this was back when Will Avery was at Burnt Hickory.
That's right,
Will gave us a lot. When I messed up, Scott would tell me, this isn't right. You didn't do this right. This is what's wrong, and you need to fix it. So, and a lot of times if you're giving guys free beer, it's all roses, So it's to find someone who will give you honest feedback on your beer and say, this flaw's in here, this is something.
That's one of the advantages of entering competitions, because it's all unbiased. They don't know you from Adam. They don't know your beer. They don't know anything about you. Especially, we're sending beers up to New England, to California. They don't know who Rainy Day Brewery is. Not that they even see it, but usually you can get some fairly constructive feedback. Sometimes judges send the same beer to two things, and you get a 40 in one, and you get a 20 in another.
Been there.
It's the same beer, same packaging.
It happens.
But you have to take it with a grain of salt, yes.
And something could have changed.
Absolutely.
The environment, the temperature it was served in, whatever. Judge's palate? Did he have chili the night before, or maybe eating chili while judging your beer?
Did he just drink a skunk beer beforehand and it's just sitting in his mouth?
And I think a lot of competitions make you send them 2 bottles, so you don't know if if they had out of the same bottle. I don't know. I assume
Anything
usually,
can
but
happen.
maybe not.
It does.
You never know.
Sure enough. Well, guys, do you develop all your own recipes? Do you do any kits any longer?
Michael is the recipe.
You're the
everything we do
recipe
is
man.
all great.
Okay.
He is the artist.
How long did you do kits before you switched over and said, let's do our recipes?
Once.
We were the same way.
right.
We did it once, and we wanted to do our own recipes.
It's fun. It's fun to that's part of the joy for me is to develop the recipe. And, I always ask Ron, well, what do we have in inventory? And then I try to figure out a recipe from that.
So
there's
build
websites
based
that
on
do
what
that
you
for
have.
food. You can go in and tell them what you have in the fridge, and they'll tell you what you can make.
And cocktails.
And they'll do that. And cocktails,
also, which I was more relevant to my interests.
Right. So. I know guys that have been brewing for years and years and years and still use the kits. That's cool if you just want to, make some beer and go with it. But kind of what's your process, Michael, when you develop a recipe?
Generally, what I'll do is I start online. I will do some research. I like to look and read about the style itself from like the BJCP guidelines. I look at some online information about the style, and then I will look at recipes that other people have done. I'll look at 10 or 12 different recipes, look at what people are doing, their techniques and stuff. And then generally what I do is I'll put together a recipe, and then I send it over to Ron, and he's like my editor. He'll fine tune it, or he'll say, maybe this would work better. And we go back and forth, and then we come up with something, and it works.
I'm kind of the process guy. So he'll make up the recipe, and then he'll send it to me, and I'll say, all right, for our equipment, we need to change this a little bit, all right? So the efficiencies are going to be a little bit different for this size recipe. So we'll change the grain build just to add a little bit more of this, or subtract a little bit of this. Or our hops are we're using a 2018 hop versus a 2017 hop, so we have to adjust the IBU a little bit. So that's kind of what I do with the recipes, and
Alphas
water
and all that stuff.
I'll do the water profiles.
You write it up, and then he checks it for sentence structure and grammar and all that.
Yeah, I just free flow, and then Ron.
That's what you got to do. It's the creative, man. That's the way it happens. Well, guys, we need to take another break. We're going to be back very soon. We're going to talk a little more about recipe development, and then we're going to dive a little bit into some new brewing science developments there. So you're listening to the Beer Guys Radio Show. We'll be back right after this. Brian and Tim, the Beer Guys. If you're like us, no lunch or dinner is complete without a pint or two of craft beer.
Which is why Truck and Tap in downtown Woodstock, Alpharetta, and Duluth are always on our list. Tim, why do they call it Truck and Tap?
Well, the tap part is easy, Brian. They've got 18 of them.
As for the truck part, that's where it gets interesting. Truck and Tap features your favorite Atlanta area food trucks, so you're getting a different menu every day.
Truck and Tap in downtown Woodstock, Alpharetta, and Duluth.
Truckandtap.com. Let them know that the Beer Guys sent you.
Craft beer forged with a reverence for tradition and new styles that start a revolution. Ironmonger Brewing. The brewers at Ironmonger Brewing pride themselves at being masters of barrel-aged, hoppy, and sour beers. They invite you to their tap room in Marietta, Georgia to taste and see. Also visit their barrel room for an intimate drinking experience with great live entertainment. Keep up to date on all things Ironmonger by liking them on Facebook. Ironmonger Brewing, establishing a new standard in craft beer.
Follow the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Now, back to the Beer Guys Radio Show.
Shake it back!
Welcome back to the Beer Guys Radio Show. If you enjoy the show, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/beerguys. Patrons get cool perks like Beer Guy swag, commercial-free episodes, and even bonus episodes that aren't available anywhere else. And we've got one this week.
There is a new bonus episode out there, Brian. So we have we drank a 2009 Santa Claus Classic.
Yes.
Recently, as our From the Cellar. So we talk about where Santa Claus is brewed. We talk about the beer, and we just have some hot Doppelbock talk there.
And there's some interesting history with the creator of that
Exactly.
that people don't realize. So, yes.
Check it out.
Yeah, check that out.
Check it out.
But in the meantime, we're going to get back into some homebrew talk.
Yes, Brian, when we went to break, we were talking about designing your own recipes. And Michael, one more quick question for you. Talking about the recipe design, I think the thing that's cool with that is, different grains, different hops. For those that don't brew, they may not know this, that even the grains, even certain types of, say a pale malt, different brands and that, you can get different flavor characteristics.
Yes, we Ron and I, as we've gotten into this, we keep a pretty good stock of grains. We probably have about, I would say at least a dozen different grains that we keep in stock that we can use. And the ones that you call base grains, your 2-year-old malt, your Pilsner, that kind of stuff, we'll buy that 55 pounds at a time. And then some of the specialty grains we buy in 5 or 10 pound lots.
And we try to stay the same brand. There's going to be some variations, but not so much between Raw and Great Western, and different brands. You're definitely going to have more variants.
And we're going to dive into a little more details around that soon, because a lot of places they just say 2-row. And you may get whatever if you buy it from this place or that place. If you don't get it the same place every time, 2-row is going to be different. It's going to be different.
Different levels of protein, which will affect the visibility of your beer, clearness or haziness. As
Michael, have you ever maybe had a few drinks and just bought just a boatload of grain and stuff? Has that ever happened to you?
It has happened. Hopefully my wife isn't listening to this episode. But I love the grains. I love the difference in the grains and trying them. For those of us that homebrew, one of the things Ron and I do is before we brew, we'll almost always take some of the grain and just eat it. Eat to taste the flavor of it. Yeah, and I had went to a local homebrew shop and probably at one point picked up about 250 pounds or so.
I need this. I need this. And another thing you can do, we've done grain teas. Just steep them in some warm water and taste and see what they come out with. And amazingly enough, you can dry hop Bud Light to get an idea of hop characteristics of that. And actually, a dry hop Bud Light is not bad.
Well, it's better than Bud Light, yeah.
Sure,
and we've done a sensory. I've done a sensory for off flavors, and they use the Bud Light because it has no flavor.
It's such a neutral base.
Yeah. So if you want to taste what an off flavor is like, you add it to a Bud Light, and then you can taste what the off flavor is.
Exactly. Sure. Yeah. So Ron, we were talking a little bit on the break, and it sounds like you were the man to ask this question. A lot of new homebrewers will not mess with this. You probably want to get into it pretty deep before you do. But water chemistry, because you can impact your beer a lot from that. So what do you guys do as far as water chemistry goes?
Water chemistry is huge, and fortunately, we're pretty blessed here in Georgia that we have a very low mineralized water, so it's a pretty blank slate. It's not RO water, but you don't have to dilute it much if you're doing a Pilsner or something that's a cleaner beer like that. You can use it and build up. So what I typically do is I'll do a little research on the style of beer that we're brewing. I use brewing water, so. I
Which
go
is
on there,
a spreadsheet that helps you calculate.
Right,
what
it gives you
do,
pH values. It gives you different mineralizations. If I add this amount of gypsum, if I add this and this and this is what I get. And it has pre-built profiles in there. So a lot of times I'll use a pre-built profile and then build our Georgia water to that profile. Sometimes I'll play around with it. I'm not a big fan of super sulfate, high sulfate beer, so I kind of dial that back a little bit, even in our IPAs and some of the others, because we'll use a yeast that's pretty high attenuation, which will dry it out a little bit. Gets it pretty dry anyway. I prefer that versus adding the high sulfate in it.
But that's kind of the next level with it. And for those that haven't brewed, like we talk about the grain selection, your grains are going to taste different from one grain manufacturer to the other. If it's called 2-row, your hops, you can have different alpha acids, and something Brian's going to dive into in just a little bit. They're talking more about like terroir with grains and hops and all that, something that really hasn't got paid a lot of attention to until recent times.
It's been kind of big in the news, and I don't know how much you guys have dived into like the effects of terroir on grain and hops, but I know we were talking to, I think it was Stan Hieronymus, and like there are some hops that grow well in places, but they actually grow best in other places. Maybe the yield's better, or maybe just the end result is better. I don't know how much you guys have looked into that and how much that affects what you purchase for brewing your beer.
I would say that's probably a little bit more extensive than what we've gone into. Hops we typically buy from Yakima Valley. I trust that they do a good job with their hops. Different grains. Again, we're trying to buy as consistent brand as possible on our base grains, at least. That way we know what to expect from batch to batch.
Well, it's tough right now for commercial brewers to do much with terroir. So, the home brewer, that's one thing, we've heard people talk about like hop contracts. And you go out there at the beginning of the season and you pick this specific crop that you want, you get contracts on that. Because if you don't do that, there's no telling what you get. And there can be a huge variance, in what hops you get. So the Master Brewers Association, I'm getting this information via Stan Hieronymus's Hop Queries newsletter. If you don't get that and you're interested in this type of science, sign up for it. I think
definitely.
It's AppalachianBeer.com.
I think so,
right?
yeah.
But you can find it out there. Anyhow, he mentioned that the Master Brewers Association did a report, and they said there's pros and cons to defining terroir, because you could make one place be perceived as better or worse or this and that, and it could really impact the way farms are done. It could impact prices if people think this, certain terroir is better. So, and the study is very, very young still, looking at terroir, so there's not really well-established information on that. So.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say, you do have options, at least. Maybe not so much with the hops, but like with malts, there's been local maltsters rising up all over the place. We've talked to Riverbend Malt House. So if you're looking for something, and you might find that perhaps what they have to offer is better for what you're trying to brew for than something else from a larger manufacturer. So that option is available too.
We recently got some Riverbend malt, their heritage malt, and really enjoyed it. I thought it added a nice flavor to the beer.
Yeah. Now, one of the reasons we were able to get that, again, let me go back and give credit where credit's due. Jason Pell offered that. He put it out there to some of the home brewers that he was buying some for his brewery, and he was willing to share it. I don't think, and I don't know for sure, but I don't think Riverbend is at the point where they can sell at the homebrew level yet. They sell
those
larger
volumes.
quantities,
yeah, right?
And they've got a business around. I'm not suggesting they should be, but
that might be possible. I was thinking back at perusing their website and all the varieties listed. I don't remember if you could actually order directly from them.
I think if you're willing to go to Asheville, you can pick up 50 pounds.
Okay.
But they're not going to ship 50 pounds.
Okay.
Just get you a pallet. Send Ron. He'll buy a whole pallet. Or send Michael. He'll buy a pallet.
That's why I drive a pickup.
Yeah, right. So, but, there's a lot of developments that I think we're seeing in professional brewing. And as old as brewing is, we're talking thousands of years, throughout Europe and a lot of places. And I saw a chart the other day about the oldest operating business in countries, and a lot of them, they're breweries, especially when you look at the European countries. But we're still learning new things about all this.
Sure.
And they were talking about certain hops give oniony taste, real strong green onion in beers. But now they're seeing, I think, Brian, if I remember this correctly, they believe it's part of an oxidation issue during hot side additions in the whirlpool, like a hot side oxidation issue. Can compound that. Is that correct?
Interesting. Yeah, I believe that's what I've read. I actually don't know a tremendous about it,
But
but I do know that people have debated and discussed the hot side aeration and the effects of that on beer quite a bit over the years.
And that's, other things that they've talked about is like dry hopping. They're finding out now that certain hops, and I think this one was specifically Eureka hops that they tested.
They studied, Eureka for
and
that.
they said after 2 days, it had basically given up all of its aroma compounds, everything that contributes aroma, and gave you all those tropical fruity flavors that you wanted. And if you went anything past those 2 days, you started getting herbal, very herbal, bitter compounds. So, people are finding out all these things about how quick it happens, time on hops and everything can make a huge difference in your beer. And I think it'll be something that we pretty much continue to go through, playing with different science, experimental hops coming out, new hops coming out that taste like oak barrels and bourbon barrels and stuff from a hop. So lots of fun for homebrewers to have, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've recently tried Sabro, which has coconut in the hop.
Yes,
it's a wonderful hop.
It's such a trip of a hop, and it's legitimately there. It's crazy that you can get that out of a hop. It's exciting though.
It is, yes. Well, guys, we have to wrap up the show here, but your beer is going to be out there for some folks to try soon. I think you're going to the Classic City Brew Fest in Athens, Georgia, soon.
Owen Ogletree, who runs that, he's been very good to us. I don't know why, but I appreciate it. But yeah, it's a cask festival, and we are going to have a cask at that festival. We're really looking forward to it because we're humbled by it, because there are some amazing breweries that he gets to come, and the fact that he would include us is quite an honor for us.
Well, make sure to get your pressure set so you don't have to drink your whole cask and get drunk on your own beer there.
Or don't, because it's kind of
whatever
fun.
works for you. Yeah. Well, guys, if folks want to see what Rainy Day Brewery's up to, where can they do that?
Well, Instagram is our biggest. It's Rainy_Day_Brewery. We're working on some other social media. We're conscripting younger members of our family to help us with that.
The old men need some help, right?
Yeah. But it's a great community here, and we're learning a lot.
Good stuff, guys. Well, thanks so much. And, if you are listening to this on the radio, we're going to have an extra segment for our podcast listeners, something we didn't get a chance to talk to in the regular show about brewing for competition. So we're going to stick around, grab the podcast to check that out. That wraps it up for this episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show. Join us next week as we're talking with Mad Tree Brewing. For more craft beer info, follow us online. We are Beer Guys Radio on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We got them all, Michael. We got all the socials there going.
Good job. You guys are top notch.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for tuning in, y'all. Have a great week, and don't forget to drink local. Cheers.
the Beer Guys on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
What in tarnation?
Now, back to the Beer Guys radio show.
Well, welcome everybody to what we like to call the fifth segment of Beer Guys Radio. This is kind of a little more free form. Doesn't go on the radio. We don't have to worry about the clock. We can just talk about whatever we want to talk about. Yeah. So we're talking homebrews, homebrewing, classic styles, and we're going to get into brewing beers, brewing homebrews for competition.
Right, because and you know what, we've moved on. So the beers we're drinking now, when we took break, we got into some of our goodies. And Michael, you brought down a bunch of Treehouse from a recent trip.
Yes, I was fortunate enough to go up there, and I actually had a day where I drove from my brother's house in Connecticut, hit Treehouse in central Massachusetts, and then drove all the way across to Boston and picked up some Trillium, and then circled back to my brother's house for dinner.
That's good stuff. And we've got some new Creature beers that we just got. Thanks to Creature for sharing these with us. What's that one called, Brian?
Cuts from the Vine, a double IPA. The finest hops from our favorite farmers. That's what it says under there.
Sounds good to me.
So I didn't do a great job of introducing who we have with us. If you weren't listening to the show prior to this, you might not know that we have Michael Syrop and Ron Mitchell, the homebrewers who are collectively known as Rainy Day Brewery, and they are award winners.
They're award winners.
Best of Georgia beer homebrewers.
But you know what? If they skip directly to the fifth segment of our podcast, it's a little weird.
I kind of like their style, though.
Yeah, just go
Get
on.
right into it.
No rules. No rules.
Exactly.
Well, guys, we want to talk a little bit with you, like we said, about brewing for competition, because I think from talking to people, what you necessarily brew to drink is not always what you would brew for competition. Now, that changes a little bit if you are brewing the classic styles like we've been talking about, but is there anything specific that you guys do to prepare for brewing or anything you do differently when you're brewing a beer for a competition?
Well, I would say that the whole, we've entered competition since we started just to kind of get feedback on what we're doing. Now that we've done it, we've had a little success at it. We want to try to, that kind of competitive edge is starting to kind of push a little bit. So there will be certain beers that we brew that were for NOAA competitions coming up that we will brew maybe to give it that little extra something. Everybody makes a standard beer, but if you can make yours stand out just a little bit, hopefully it gives you that edge. Maybe hopefully it's not something that stands out in the wrong way.
Right. Because that can be tricky. Because necessarily, especially if you are someone who does a lot of experimental type brews, it can be hard to find the right category to put a beer in, to say it goes into this or that. You do hybrid styles. For a while it was very difficult to get the hazy IPAs, the New England IPAs. Where do they go, here or there? Now they have their own classification.
Yeah, I still think the BJCP, which is where the guidelines come from, they're still a little bit behind where the brewing industry is and the home brewers are.
It's 2015 was the last update, right?
Right.
So 18, wasn't it?
No, they haven't changed their definitions of styles since to this right now. New England IPAs are in the same category of specialty IPAs. They go in with Belgian IPAs and white and all those.
Yeah.
That's it. So what's something, if you can reveal it, what's something that you've done with like any one of your beers? What's an example of something you've done to just kind of knock it up, put it up a notch, make it stand out?
For example, our Kentucky Common, which we had earlier.
Yeah.
We added a little bit of extra of some specialty malts to give it a little bit of extra caramel note, just to kind of a little sweeter note. It tends to the sweet. It's a sweeter beer, but we wanted it to stand out. And then sometimes what you do is you brew a beer and then you taste it and you realize you can't enter it in the category you brewed it for.
Exactly right. Yeah.
We brewed some pills that we thought we were going to hit pills, and we tasted, this is kind of sweet. So we put it in as a Helles.
Yeah.
Did pretty well as a Helles. It wasn't a pills, but did fairly well as that.
Okay. See, and that's it. Play it to the style. We brewed a Hefeweizen one time that my cousin is gluten intolerant. And so we use Clarity Firm in it. Brilliant idea on my part.
Yes.
When you do a wheat beer that's supposed to have that wheat haze in it, and you throw Clarity Firm in there, what happens? Drops clear. So now we've got a Crystal Weizen. So, we just said, all right, you got to switch it over. That's no longer a half. And it actually was a really tasty beer. It was
that
really
was a
nice.
surprisingly easy drinking beer, and we got the larger glasses to drink it, and it is probably oddly the the keg that kicked fastest of everything
it
we brewed.
Yeah.
There was I know I remember you sending me a message, Brian, and then you showed me the keg kicked. I'm like, no, because I was gonna come drink another big tall glass.
And
we
were so unexcited about this beer when we brewed it, because our recipe formulation method is much like yours. We went out and bought like the top 6, 8, 10 rated Hefeweizens and sampled those and took notes on what we liked and didn't like and what we wanted. And at the end of our sampling day, we're like, really not that excited about brewing this beer.
They were all kind of disappointing. Yeah.
But we're like, well, we're this far into it, let's do it. And we ended up brewing, Hef is one of those that I could take it or leave it, but when they're done extremely well, they're good beers.
It's a classic style too.
Very much so.
And that's the other thing when you're brewing for competition. You're brewing for what the judges expect for that style. And so you have to read the guidelines. You have to know what, and sometimes it's not exactly what we think of as that style of beer. I like my stouts, for example. I don't like a lot of hop character in my stouts. I keep my hops, but we've brewed a stout and sent into competitions and been told there wasn't enough hop character in it, and we were dinged for it. So, we went back and looked, and you reread the style guidelines and you learn, and again, it's an educational process, but it's good because it makes you refine your ability to brew.
It does. Yeah, like you said, because what you like to drink is not always what necessarily fits that. We did a peach saison one time and entered it in a couple competitions, and I thought it was perfect because the saison really shined through, and you taste like you were biting into a fresh peach, but you still had the saison there because I like with fruit beers, I enjoy still being able to tell the base style of the beer.
Mm-hmm.
But I got dinged for not enough peach from 4 different judges across 2 competitions. And I'm like, no, this isn't right. This beer, that was the perfect amount of peach. Well, it was the perfect amount for me, which didn't necessarily fit the category, that I'd put it into for what should be a fruit beer.
I also liked it. I think that we were on the tip of the spear for heavily fruited beers at that point in time. We didn't realize that was coming. So I think that was a good indicator that was on the horizon. We just didn't see it. So. But for the style, subtle and not overwhelming. It wasn't all just peach or fake. It wasn't a paint roller of fruit on your tongue. It was a beer that had nice peach notes to it. So I like what we did as well.
But it does seem that at competitions, they want that extra.
Oh, yeah.
It can't just be a subtle. If you're going to call it a peach beer, it can't be a subtle peach. It has to be peach. It has to be there. It has to be pronounced.
We might have done better if we just submitted it as a saison and see if people, this has a wonderful
nice
fruit flavor to it.
it.
We might have actually won for that.
But that's the other thing about competitions is if you have a question, enter it in 3 different categories. Yeah. Enter it as a regular saison. Enter it as a fruit beer. Enter it as this, and see how it does.
The problem with that is all the beers you have to give away that you want not to give away, especially if you really like the beer. That was a consideration a few times. Where
it was a couple times where we were like, man, I want to enter this, but
we're getting low.
We're pretty low on this beer.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, when you're proud of it, you're like, I don't want it sitting there and unappreciated because I know we'll love it. I know our friends will dig it too. So, yeah.
When you guys asked us to come on here and we were excited to do it, we knew we were going to bring some of our beers. I think there's 1 or 2 competitions we didn't enter because we had to bring the beers here for you
tough,
guys.
Man.
We apologize,
tough
but
choices sometimes, right? And, like you were saying, Ron, with that little something extra, it is tricky to get the extra without going coloring outside of the lines,
exactly,
so to speak. And, there's been we've done well in competitions, Brian.
Yeah.
We've medaled several different times with a few different beers, and we've had our feelings hurt a couple times too, where we've just been super proud of a beer. And there's beers that I entered that I'm like, I hope this does well. There's a couple times I've entered and I'm like, we're getting best of show with this. This is going to win it all, man. And I'll come back and not even medal. I'm like, man, I don't.
How does that even?
No
happen?
way.
So. As we talked about, you just never know what happened to that beer in transit at the competition. Maybe they dropped it and it rolled around. Maybe it sat in the back. Somebody's taking it from place A and it sat in the back of that car for 2 days at 122
somebody's
degrees.
Storage shed.
Yeah. You don't know what's happened to your beer between here and there.
So in terms of strategy, thinking that, you'd like to win some medals, you'd like to bring home something, do you ever brew a beer for a style just because you know that style won't be won't have a lot of competition. You'll have a fighting chance to win it.
The Kentucky Common is a historic beer. It's not a beer that you could ask 10 people, probably 3 of them have ever heard of it or have ever had one.
Right.
So that is one. Now, we didn't brew it for that reason. We brew it because somebody asked us to brew something similar to that. But it fits in great in competitions because there's not a lot of competition in that competition.
Right. But the interesting thing is with historical beers, and you guys were talking about the evolution of beer. We talked about that a little bit earlier. One of the historical styles is Goza. It was considered historical. Well, now everybody's making it right.
Yeah, sure.
So I mean,
graduated there.
It's different. So you know the Kentucky Common competes against the Goza, and there's a couple other beers. There's a Polish style that's in there, and a couple of others.
Oh, the Grodzki.
So question for you guys: do you consider is West Coast IPA, is that a classic style now?
No.
Okay. All right.
To me, it's not. No.
All right, Brian, what do you think? Is West Coast IPA a classic style?
Yeah, I think it's
okay.
I don't want to say it's. I want to say it's classic. It's been around. It's established. I think
it's
should
approaching. It's getting there. Huh?
Yeah.
So.
My feeling is that if you're talking about competitions, it's the one that if you just enter IPA, if you enter in a competition as an IPA, they're expecting a West Coast IPA. If you're doing any other
think
style,
they still are?
Yes. If you're doing a New England IPA, you're entering it as a special IPA, and you're notating
now there's a new
that's a New
category
England.
for it.
And we got dinged once. We did what we thought was a New England IPA, but this was a couple of years ago, and we decided doing a New England IPA. And like you talked about your Hefeweizen, we did a clear beer, but it had a lot of fruity hops, and we got dinged because it wasn't hazy. Well, there's no guideline for that.
You know what? When the New England IPA craze first came to Georgia, a lot of the commercial brewers were doing stuff like that. You were getting a lot of kind of hybrid. You'd have a hazy West Coast. So you'd have this beer that was hazy, but was just pine tree bitterness in your face with a little hint of tropical fruit there. And it was something where everybody heard this thing was a craze, and they started doing their own interpretation of it. Same thing with the little flash in the pan last year with brewed IPAs.
Oh, yeah.
People did their own interpretation of it, and they were just being very liberal.
I still like brewed IPA.
I'm down with brewed IPA
I have
too,
not.
man.
We have not done it, and I keep talking about giving it a shot. But I've had some. I enjoy it.
I'm good with them too.
I'm not 100% sure they're done. I think that maybe they're not as hot as they once were.
They're on life support, Brian.
I think they have. I think there's possibilities to be explored with what you can do with basically adding amylase to
dry them out, man.
Dry things out and see what you can do with that. So I think there are things that could be done, and we might. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some people applying that strategy to different types of beers.
I think it was one of the memeing beer Instagram accounts the other day that's like, do you have any they use the Ron Swanson meme. It's like, are there any history of mental illness in your family? And he said, I've got an uncle who's still trying to make brewed IPA a thing. So that was the response to it there.
Beer memes.
Yes.
Yeah, classic.
Well, guys, I think we're going to wrap this up. Is there anything for a homebrewer out there, someone who's just started or is getting new or getting ready to start competition, any final words or your one pro tip? Michael?
My big thing is join a homebrew club. There are a lot of people there that will give you good feedback and give you tips. And most of us aren't doing something new. Everything you've done is a been there, done that, and find somebody who's been there and done that.
Good deal.
I would say don't get yourself crazy on the blogs. Don't read everything and believe, this is what I have to do, right?
Sure.
Because there's so much garbage out there. And there's so many people that say I'm a professional brewer that are maybe never even brewed a batch in their life. Find, John Palmer, get your basics down and then expand from there.
Good deal. Brian, what's your one pro tip for homebrewers?
Sanitation. That seems like it always comes back to sanitation. And also listen to Beer Guys Radio. But you already are, so you're doing that right.
Ahead of the
You've
game
got
there.
that going for you already.
My pro tip, take amazing notes.
Take
phenomenal notes. Document everything, so when you go back to brew it, if you did something right, you know what you did, and more importantly, if you did something wrong, you know what you did. So
Great idea.
Yeah. So we've got don't get caught up in the minutia from Ron, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've got sanitation from Brian there. And Michael, what was yours? I've been drinking, man.
That's okay. I think that you join the homebrew club.
Join your homebrew club.
Yeah.
Find someone who knows what's up and follow their lead, right?
People who brew love to tell other people how they brew.
Good stuff. Yes, they do. And share their beer, which is great. Well, guys, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Your beers were really tasty. I think we gave some fantastic advice to folks today. So pick up homebrewing, y'all. Give it a shot. Get you a small kit. Brooklyn Brew Shop sells 1-gallon kits. Then they actually make pretty darn tasty beer. We've done a couple of them. So you could start on your kitchen if you just want to play around and see if it's something you enjoy doing. Make you 1 gallon of beer. You're going to get what, 10 bottles out of that maybe?
Something like that,
Somewhere in there. But you'll have a good time with it. This is the Beer Guys Radio Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you have a great time. We'll talk to you soon.